The Kaya Girl, Chapter 1. "Hi," I said. There was no reply. To say, I tried in tree. Still, she was quiet. She looked frustrated with herself for not being able to reply. She gave a shy smile to show she did not intend to be rude and lowered her large metal bowl. I smiled back, and suddenly, language did not seem important. It was as if we knew each other already. "Abna, stop wasting time and bring her inside," my aunt called from inside the shop. "She's here to carry things, not to chat with you. Hey, small girl, brah." She finished off brusquely, ordering the girl inside with a curl of her fingers. The girl hurried in carrying her oversized metal bowl before her and placed it at Auntie Lydia's feet. As she bent down, I could see that her eyes were caught by the gleaming French manicure on Auntie's long pointy toenails. With eyes still lowered, she collected the 6 burgeoning shopping bags from the fat customer with 8 rings on her fingers and arranged them deftly inside her bowl. This was the awkward moment because she needed help but did not know how to ask for it. I rushed over and grabbed the rim of the bowl to help lift it onto her head. We struggled a bit as it tipped precariously in my direction. Then it was up, sitting snugly on the flattened pan on her head, a faded scarf rolled into a cloth snail shell. As we did this, a new customer entered the shop, immaculate with a white lace and nagu wrapper and top, with a red and gold gilly on her head. It was so gorgeously folded and tied that I resolved there and then to go to the shop next door and beg the Nigerian lady to teach me how to do it. Auntie was mesmerized too, so I took advantage and slipped out, following the girl with a huge bowl on her head. I could not believe how straight and fast she walked, with that weight on her head. I imagined that if we had put that on my head instead, my whole neck would have been pushed down into my chest and my knees would have collapsed into my feet. We walked in a single file, Auntie's customer, who had now become the girl's, leading the way towards her car, the girl following and me, unseen, bringing up the rear. I did not really know why I was following. I didn't think about that till later, a few hours later and then, many years later. After a few hours later, I thought I had probably done it because I was getting bored, spending all day every day at Auntie's shop. Mommy had traveled to London to have a baby, and Daddy was busy with work, and Aunt Lydia had offered to have me for the long vacation. I liked Aunt Lydia, but I was a bit scared of her, and it would have been rude to say no. But also, I was looking forward to spend time at a shop in Makwala Market. Mommy hardly went to the market. She said it exhausted her, so she sent our house help every week instead. I had only been to Makwala the few times she wanted to visit Auntie Lydia there. I found it fascinating, all the hustle and bustle, the smells and the colors. One minute, you'll be admiring the sequined lace fabric, and the next, you will almost stumble over a tray of coiling, written black snails. You will see granite paste in huge bowls, enough to dive into, and substances you never knew existed, rolled into balls, cut into blocks, twisted into shapes that you wondered what on earth you were meant to do with. Eat them, take a bath with them, build a house with them. Auntie Lydia's shop was one of the finest in Mokola Market, with air conditioning and brocade curtains. Oh yes, she was a proper market queen, my auntie. But the one thing that disappointed me about her shop was that she did not have a cash till. I had always longed to press a button on those machines, like the uniform shop assistant sitting in rows in the supermarkets, tapping their fingers so fast, so expertly over the keys. No, Auntie just collected all the money, rather untidily, I thought, in the lower drawer of her desk. But it was still exciting to see all the pretty things in the shop, and to be given the opportunity for serving customers. It made me feel quite grown up. Although I noticed the girls with the large metal bowls on their heads walking around in my first few days, I did not really pay them much attention until one came into our shop. That was when a customer made a large purchase. Abna, go outside and call us the Kayayo, Auntie said. A Kaya what? I asked. Auntie Lydia smiled. Your parents are making a brony out of you at that your American school, she said, glancing with a mixture of pride and embarrassment at her customer. Go and call me one of those girls carrying big bowls on their heads, she said, switching to Tree in a deliberate manner she used whenever she was on a mission to rescue the Ghanaian in me. I stepped outside, blinking in the blazing sunshine, and screwed up my eyes, trying to spot one. I did not take long because she signaled pettily when she saw me scanning the stalls and alleys. I nodded and she marched briskly into the shop. I noticed them more after, but I had never had the urge to talk to them until today. This one was different. She looked no older than me, and it was the shy, slightly scared look in her eyes that made me notice her. And when I realized she didn't speak any language, I knew I was amazed and intrigued. How could she be working in Mokola Market when she did not speak Twi or Ga or English? What did she speak? I wondered as I trailed her and her customer. Perhaps I'll find out when we reach the car park. But I did not. She just lowered her bowl and packed the goods into the Madame's car boot for her. Then she accepted the coins with a tiny nod and put the empty bowl back on her head. The car sparked with a rich purr. As she turned around, she saw me immediately, and I knew she was not surprised, although she had no idea I was following her. She smiled the same smile. It was the second time, and I noticed the same thing. That when she smiled at me, the lost look in her eyes disappeared. Perhaps that was what made me follow her. I knew that Auntie would be wondering where I was, and judging from the girl's grip of her bowl, she knew she should be looking for her next customer. But she just walked over to me, as we had an appointment. We looked at each other, and I noticed she had a fine line aged vertically in the middle of each cheek. I'm Abna, I said in Chi. I'm Faiza, she said in a language I'll soon find out was called Dagbanli. We did not speak each other's language, but I heard her name and she heard mine. And I find out other things about her too that day. Don't ask me how, but somehow she was just so easy to talk to. I guess we must have used some sign language and a few universal words that even she could understand. I don't know how to explain it, but I found her easier to talk to than people with whom I could converse in 2 or 3 languages. She came from a place called Tolong in the northern region, and she just arrived in Accra the day before, and she was 14 years old, like me. Chapter 2. When I got back to Auntie's shop that day, it was like magic wearing off. Auntie Lydia just had a way of squeezing it out of things, like wriggling water from a rag. Faiza became nothing but a kayayo once again. Auntie did not know whether to be amused or annoyed that I knew her name. "You followed that kayayo to the car park?" she asked in disbelief. I had not had the time to make up a better story, so I told her I'd been worried she might drop our goods because the bowl was so heavy. "Those girls dropped something?" she sneered. "Their neck muscles are made of steel. You don't know the things they carry up where they come from." Gifty sniggered. She was Auntie's maid, a daughter of one of her husband's many poor relatives from a village somewhere in the eastern region. "Now, make yourself useful and get on the internet and open that email account you set up for me," Auntie continued. I wanted to ask what the Kayayo girls, or whatever they were called, carried where they came from, but did not want to sound cheeky, and anyway, I had a feeling she would not be interested in going into it. Moreover, I did not want to give Gifty the satisfaction of sniggering at her again, and I needed to get back into Auntie's good book after wandering off like that without any warning. However, I asked Faiza that question as soon as we had enough language between us. She was learning Tree and Broken English rapidly because of her work in the market. I was helping her with both and even picking up a few Dagbani words myself. "We carry water," she said. "Water?" I asked. "From where?" "From the stream," she said logically. "To our homes. Sometimes we walk the whole morning with bowls on our heads like this one." Full of water? I could not believe it. How could anyone carry that? And for hours? It was hard to imagine when all I ever had to do was turn on a tap. "And firewood." "What? We carry firewood? From where?" I echoed myself. "From the trees?" She laughed. "Haba, is that not where it grows?" She had a cheeky streak. "Faiza. But you would never know it if you only saw her as a kayayo. We cut it from the trees and take it home and make fire for cooking." As I learned more about her life, I found out that she also carried foodstuff when she went to the farm with her family. That's corn, millet, yams, granules, beans, and she carried shea nuts too. That one was tough to understand. She kept repeating the name, but I just didn't know what she meant. In the end, she grabbed me by the hand and led me to a section of the market where they sold shea butter. I nodded with comprehension, and she asked me if I had ever used it. I said no and wriggled my nose because I didn't like the smell of it. She laughed at me. "Where I come from, we eat it," she said. I felt disgusted by the idea, but at the same time a little disgusted with myself for wriggling my nose at something other people eat. I did not know why I cared about this. I was sure if I had been with my classmates at school, we could have laughed it off quite comfortably. "Come with me," she said again, and this time she led me to a part of the market where women in colorful veils were cooking all sorts of things. I felt my mouth was watered and remembered it was lunchtime. That was why I'd been able to go looking for Faiza while Auntie took her lunch break. "I'll eat mine later." I had called over my shoulder, trying to get out before she stopped me. "This is kuli kuli," said Faiza. This time, it was me who had pulled her, following my nose. I looked at the crooked brown circles that had just been lifted out of a sizzling frying pan and wondered what could smell this good. "It was made of granite," she told me, miming the rolling of the paste and twisting her imaginary strip into a ring. I pulled out a coin from my pocket and was surprised how many of them I got in exchange. From the first bite, I knew I had found a favorite hunt. Faiza also pulled out a coin, a smaller one, from the knot of her wrapper cloth and went over to a different fruit seller, squatting on their haunches and greeting her respectfully. She came back with 2 blocks of something I had never seen before. It looked a bit like soft soap, but it smelled good, and I was hungry. "Try it," she said, handing me one. I bit off a chunk and licked a tight oiliness off my lips. I said, licking it without the faintest idea what it could be. "What is it?" "Steamed beans cake," she said. I would never have guessed it was made from beans. I finished it off and looked purposefully in the direction of the seller. Then she added with a crafty look in her eyes, "With melted shea butter." I looked at her thinking she was joking. She was laughing at me all right, but I could see she was serious. That was something we were able to tell with each other right from the beginning. I tried to describe the beans cake to Aunt Alicia later on, but she cut off my description with, "Hausa food? So now you are eating with Hausa girl, that brony and the kayayo," Gifty taunted under her breath. I knew she was jealous because she considered Faiza a bush northerner and just didn't understand what I saw in her. Although she was also from a village, she was a southerner, and I knew she was puzzled that I should favor Faiza's company to hers, especially when we were family in a way. She called me Brony, although I was darker skinned than her, to show that she did not consider someone as privileged as myself a true Ghanaian. It was her way of getting back at me. I tried to tell Auntie that Faiza was not a Hausa, but a Dagomba. Not that I knew what the problem would be if she was a Hausa girl anyway. But as always seemed to happen, when the topic of Faiza was raised, I could not seem to hold her attention beyond one sentence. Even if she took a fleeting interest, other things always seemed so much more important. As soon as I started to talk about her, that I would feel embarrassed for doing so. Like some greenhorn who didn't know such things were of no interest to people who had better things to do. I thought more about this feeling when business was slow in the shop. Should I be embarrassed? I wondered. It was certainly odd for a girl like me, a doctor's daughter, a pupil of the American school, to be striking up a friendship with a Kayayo in Makala Market. Was it really a friendship though? I asked myself, half of me shaking my head quickly. Of course not, and the other nodding slowly. Yes, of course. I knew I could never describe it as such to my mother or my friends at school. A word like acquaintance seemed more apt when I thought of ever discussing it with such people. But in my heart, I knew it was friendship. Had known it from that first smile we exchanged, and it was not just any friendship either. Faiza seemed to know what I was thinking about before I said it. We hardly needed language to communicate. I love her sarcasm, the way she will make a question seem idiotic with a simple haba. But the laughter was always for both of us, and how much of it there was. I never knew there was so much freedom in laughter until I met her. It will well up like millions of tiny bubbles, filling us up with lightness till we felt we could float away, fly in the sky, free as the birds. When I got back to the shop, I would be smiling at the customers, chatting with Auntie until I asked if someone was paying me per word. One of the many affectionate reprimands with which she simultaneously loved and disapproved of my ways. I knew that her own children, when they were children, would not have chatted on and on to her as if she were one of their mates. They never went to an expensive school full of bronies, but to a strict Ghanaian boarding school where homo was a verb that meant bullying, and children were terrified of people a year older, let alone adults. Auntie tolerated a lot in me with her unique brand and grumpy affection. She would allow Faiza to hang around outside the shop, chatting with me in between customers. Our shop became her station, so she no longer had to roam around the market looking for random customers. She also carried goods for the Nigerian ladies' customers from the Gele shop next door. When business was slow, she would turn her huge silver bowl upside down and use it as a seat, while I perched on the step outside the shop, the chilled air seeping deliciously into my back from underneath the door. Speaking Tree, peppered with English, Dagbani, and sign language. It was astonishing how fast Faiza had picked up Tree and English. If we spotted a customer heading our way, we would break off quickly and I would lead them in, while she melted like a chameleon into the background, waiting to be called if she were needed. I often accompanied her to the car park. Auntie had given up protesting. Sometimes, when we were out of her sight, we would stop and I would make Faiza transfer the bowl to my head. It did not seem fair to me that somehow she should always carry it. She was just a tiny girl, a full head shorter than me, and so skinny. I often forgot how small she was because when she talked, and when her face planed into the huge smile that was almost too big for it, she just seemed the same size a person as anyone else. It was when I saw the bowl on her head, ridiculously dwarfing away, that it struck me how little she was. But she let me do it because she saw how proud I was when I was able to balance and carry it more than a few paces, and she did not want to spoil my fun. It was more to humor me than to help her, because I struggled under it far more than she ever did. That was why she was a Kaya Yo, I guess. As she explained to me, Kaya meant load or goose in Hausa. And as I already knew, Yo meant girl or woman in Ga. I did not wonder at this odd mongrel of a word until much later. For now, I just marvel how such a tiny girl could carry such heavy loads. There was something so strong about her smallness. I envied it, although it did not seem to make sense for a girl like me to envy everything about a girl like her. I also envied her freedom. One day, I told her so much and she laughed. "You envy me?" "Yes," I said. "You just run your own life without anyone telling you what to do." "Ah, you think you are the only one with an auntie, don't you?" "You have an auntie too?" I asked, and then immediately felt silly for asking such a question. Of course, everyone had aunties. Any moment she was going to say haba and look at me with dancing eyes, but she didn't, and when I looked up, she just simply said, You want to know my story? We were sitting in our usual place, she on her upturned bow, and me on the step. I nodded. Chapter 3. I come from a small village close to Tolong. Faiza began. I was not born there, but when I was 4 years old, my parents gave me to my auntie, my father's sister, who lives there. They gave you to her? I interrupted. What for? For life, Faiza said simply. That is our tradition. I did not really understand, but I wanted her to continue the story, so I kept quiet. My auntie had her own children, and I helped her look after the little ones. And I helped her with everything else: cooking, cleaning, washing, trading, farming. When her children went to school, I stayed behind doing all that work. Sometimes, when they came back from school, they would sing A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and they would count 1, 2, 3. And I learned some of it and wanted to learn more. But I knew my auntie would never send me to school. My cousin Asana was my best friend in that house, and sometimes she would open her exercise books and show me what they have learnt in school. One day, Asana came looking for me in tears because her parents had just told her not to go back to school. They wanted to marry her to a rich man. He was one of her father's friends, except that he was older than her father. I knew that man. His mouth was full of gaps, and the teeth left were brown from chewing cola nuts. He already had 3 wives. He was quick-tempered, but everyone admired him because he owned a village corn mill and a tractor. It was the only one in the village. When Asana protested, her father asked if she was mad. She did not know what to fear more: her father's anger or marriage to a large brown teeth. A large brown teeth? I giggled. Trust you, Faiza. That was what we called him, Asana and I. Asana got a headache every time we talked about him, and she said the idea of getting close to him made her stomach hurt as well. Poor thing, I said, genuinely heartsick for this cousin of my friend, whom I had never met. How awful to be forced to marry a large brown teeth. Well, and that wasn't the only problem. How do you mean? You see, there was this boy she liked already. Ah, I said conspiratorially. And what was he like? Oh, he was cute. He had dimples and was always joking around. All the girls liked him in the school. But she was the one he liked, right? I asked somehow, sensing the flow. You know it. You see, my cousin was so pretty, and she giggled a lot, just like you. Actually, like me? I asked, feeling like I was learning something new about myself. Yes, like you, Faiza said, with one of her oversized smiles. And like him, they just understood each other. Excellent, I said, enjoying the story, and then remembering it was a sad one. So what happened? Well, she had hoped that once she finished school, Malik might ask for a hand in marriage. But now, all her dreams were shattered. Malik was still in school, still surrounded by girls who liked him, and she was forced with becoming the 4th wife of a large brown teeth. But it did nothing to soften her father's heart. She was not the first young woman in the household
that he had married off. What about her mother? In our village, a woman cannot tell a man what to do. Auntie scolded her and told her to stop crying and be strong, that she was not a child anymore. She knew they would get a rich dowry, and that her husband had been praying for Alaji's eye to fall on Asana. But I knew it was her daughter's misery that had tightened the corners of her mouth. Asana was a twin. That was why she had not been given to her father's sister as a child. Unlike many of us, she was raised by her own mother, so they were very close. But her twin sister had died when they were small. Sometimes she used to tell me I was like a sister come back to her. As soon as Alaji sent the initial caller to her parents, Asana became like a prisoner. The adults in the household hardly allowed her out of their sight. They were impatient for Browntie to come and take her away, so that they would not have to worry any longer about anything happening to jeopardize the marriage, and so that they could all enjoy the dowry he brought. She felt so hurt and abandoned. She used to just sit in the room, staring at the wall. Then she would lie on her mat as if she was asleep, but she wasn't asleep. She had cried all the tears she had, so she was just lying quietly, trying to wish herself away from there. So when did the wedding take place? Haba, Faiza exclaimed, smiling. And then she said carefully and mischievously in English, "Exercise patience." I had to smile too. It was so funny, but at the same time so perfectly correct, so typical of her. She picked up the story. Alaji had traveled to Mecca for the Hajj and wanted the marriage to take place as soon as he got back. That was even why he wanted to take a new wife, to celebrate his return and his officially becoming an Alaji, the first in the village. Auntie tried to cheer Asana up by telling her that he would bring back beautiful things for her from Saudi Arabia. But it only made Asana clench her stomach and turned away. She told me how she felt like a cow being fattened for the feast. The wedding was to take place a day after Alaji's return. The Imam would bless him as an Alaji and then perform the marriage rite straight after. So there would be a double celebration. The day he returned, the whole village was astir. When I got home from the stream that evening, Auntie was not there. She had gone to her sister's house to borrow some jewelry for the festivities the next day. Her finest cloth, the one I loved with glittering gold threads woven into the pattern, was hanging on the line outside to air. On the line outside Uncle's room, on the other side of the compound, were 3 batakari. He will wear all of them tomorrow, with the smallest sleeveless one on the inside and the biggest longest one on the outside, to make him look big and important. It had intricate embroidery on the front and back, and the matching trousers hung next to it. I had never seen him wear that batakari before. The whole compound was busy. It seemed as if all the women of the household were cooking, for even after the bride was gone, visitors would come and congratulate her proud parents. Uncle's second wife and 2 other women were pounding dry corn for the tuonzafi in the mortar outside Auntie's room. They were singing along to the rhythm of their alternating pistols, making up a song about the wedding and laughing at each other's contribution, some rather rude. Uncle's sister was busy over the outside hut, making soup in an enormous black pot and shaking her head at their song with a smile on her face. She called me over impatiently. and held me down with a heavy headpan. "What took you so long?" she asked impatiently, using an empty tin to slouch water from my pan into her bucket. I tripped and fell on the way home, and I had to go back for more water," I told her, trying to dry my face and neck with a corner of my wet wrapper. And I went inside. I wondered how Asana must be feeling, hearing all the preparations and the songs of the maize pounders. I found her holding a knife and staring intently at the sharp edge, as if in a trance. She did not even hear me till I was right in front of her. "What are you doing?" I asked in fright. She jumped, startled. Then she put both hands over her face, and for the first time in days, tears ran down her cheeks again. "Oh, Faiza," she said in a cracked voice, "there's no other way out for me." "Stop it," I said, grabbing the knife from her and turning it to the basket in which Auntie kept her cooking utensils. "How can you even think about such a thing?" "If you were me, you would think about it too," she said. I held her and she cried, and I cried too. Then I stopped and said, "It is not the only way out, Asana. There is another way." "To run away?" "Faiza, if that were possible, I would have done it already. But you know how many people are out there and how they have been watching me." "I'll help you," I said. When I was at the stream fetching water today, a group of girls were talking about their plan to run away and become kayaye in the big city markets. That is why I was late getting back." "What?" Asana asked, her eyes becoming huge. "Yes, they have been planning it for a while, and they leave at dawn tomorrow to catch the early bus down south. They are hoping, with all the excitement about your wedding, it will take people a while to realize they are missing." "Leaving at dawn?" Asana echoed. It seemed to be the only thing she had heard. "Yes," I whispered. "They would not even have told me, but Rakia is part of the group, and she could not keep a secret from me, so they made me swear not to tell." "Rakia, your best friend? She's leaving?" Asana was incredulous. "But she's no older than you." "Oh, some in the group are even younger than her. You know how everybody wants to go these days." Rakia had been dreaming of it ever since she saw the things the returnees brought with them when they came back this year for the granite harvest. She has been going on about English bowls ever since. I had to interrupt Faiza's story now because curiosity was getting the better of me. Returnees? English bowls? I had to know what she was talking about. "Okay," she said patiently. "Let me explain a few things to you. I am not the only Kayayo from my village. Every year, many of the young girls leave for the market of Kumasi and Accra." "Why?" I asked. "Well, they feel they will have a better life that way. Many of them are with their aunties, so they know they will never go to school. And even in those schools, you know these village schools, or I guess you don't know. But anyway, those schools cannot help them become anything in future. So some of them convince their families to let them go so they can earn some money, and others just run away without telling anyone. Some come back for the ground harvest every year to make some money back home, and also to show everybody all the fancy things they have bought in the city. Like English bowls. What on earth are those?" You know those cooking pots decorated with bright colors and patterns? Yes, the ones that come in stacks of different sizes. Exactly. Those are what we call English bowls. Oh, so what do the girls want them for? Faiza smiled at my puzzlement. Where I come from, women have to collect cooking pots and utensils and serving bowls and plates in preparation for marriage, she said. For marriage? I echoed in surprise. But you said some of those girls were younger than you. I know, explained Faiza patiently. But in the village, we marry young, and the girls like to start preparing as early as possible so they will have a good collection by the time they get married, and they continue adding to them after marriage. Wow, I exclaimed. What do they need so many pots and pans for? Well, in your home, when your mother cooks, it's probably only 5 or 6 people, right? My mother never did the cooking, but I knew that was not the point, so I nodded, even fewer. Faiza continued, in my village, a woman may have to cook for up to 50 people at a time. When it was her turn to cook, she cooks for the entire household, and with all the different wives and their children and other relatives, that comes to a lot of people. Wow, I said again, no wonder your auntie needs a helper. Oh yes, she said, it's a lot of work, you can imagine. So does your auntie have a lot of bowls? I asked. I wish you could see them, she exclaimed. So many sets, and they all stacked neatly on a table, some as high as the ceiling. I tried to visualize walking into someone's room and seeing in pride of place, of all the things, a towering display of flowery pots and pans. I realized that I actually wanted to see them, actually wanted to go to Faiza's home and see all the things she was telling me about. I pictured Auntie Lydia's reaction on hearing that I wanted to go up north. It sounds like your auntie is very proud of her collection, I said. Oh yes, back home, that is a woman's pride. So they all try to get the best collections. That's why the young girls struggle to work and buy them. So have you started your collection? I asked slyly. She smiled with eyelids lowered. Not yet. But when I am able to save enough money, I will. Are you looking forward to getting married? Oh no, she said. Not yet. But getting my pots and pans is just something I have to do. I understood what she meant. It was like getting something that everyone else in your class had, or passing an important exam. Just one of those things you had to do, whether it made sense or not. No, getting married is not something I can imagine for myself right now, Faiza continued, especially after what Faiza went through. Oh yes, Asana, I said, impatient to get back to the story. So what happened next? At that moment, I realized that an important looking customer was standing before us with their hands on her hips. I usually saw the customers before they got that far and made sure we cleared the doorway. But this time, I had been so engrossed in Faiza's story that I had not spotted her. Flustered, we both jumped out of her way.
Chapter 4. Sorry, madam, I said, with an ingratiating smile as the customer marched into the shop. I scuttled after her with a quick backward nod at Faiza, who was already melting into her surroundings. I was nervous that she would complain to Auntie Lydia. She looked the type. But it seemed my apology had done the trick because she said nothing and allowed herself to be passed over by Auntie, pointing at the most expensive lace fabrics. I had a feeling Faiza would be needed for this purchase. The lady chose my favorite cloth in the shop, a peach lace encrusted with specks of diamonds that were hardly visible, but sparkled fabulously when they caught the light. It was that hidden brilliance that I loved. When Auntie opened it out, 100 tiny gems caught the fluorescent lights overhead, and I could not help gasping. The lady looked at me with a smile. "You have a good taste like me," she said with a wink. Suddenly, I recognized her. She was the one who had come into the shop in the mesmerizing outfit the day I had met Faiza. I liked her after the compliment and was glad she was the one to buy my favorite cloth. It was the only one of its kind in the shop, and I was sorry to see it go. But at the same time, I felt Auntie's pride in a good sale. I thought of Faiza's description of her auntie's cloth with the glints of gold. I knew how she felt about it. One day, I too will own gorgeous fabrics, I thought. I wondered sadly if Faiza ever would. Not if she remained a Kayayo. That was for sure. The lady also bought some high-heeled gold shoes and a matching bag. "My daughter is having her engagement next month," she announced proudly. Well, Auntie really pulled out all the stops after that. "I from Mami, mother of the bride," she exclaimed. "We have to make sure you look like a queen, so that when they come to take your daughter, they will know where she is coming from." The lady agreed, beaming. I could just picture her in the lace and gold accessories, splendid as the sunshine. She chose 2 other lace fabrics, 2 kente cloth, and a glinting piece of asoke. "The bride will have to change her outfit several times," she explained. "Call your friend," Auntie finally instructed me when the lady was done. It was almost an hour later. She had fallen in love with the shop, and while chatting with Auntie, had decided to buy pretty things for all her daughters, not just the bride. This auntie of mine, I thought with a smile as I stepped outside. People didn't even notice when she was wooing their money out of them. She had even managed to get herself invited to the engagement. I shaded my eyes against the blinding outdoors, and Faiza appeared as magical as she has disappeared. I saw a look of recognition and then of slight puzzlement on the lady's face as Faiza entered the shop, and she realized that this Kayayo really was my friend. This time, Auntie herself wanted to accompany the lady to the car park, so I stayed in the shop. I pictured the engagement ceremony with all the women in their finery, looking good, smelling good, feeling good. The bride's family would sit on one side and the groom's on the other. In a stylish procession, the young woman of his family will carry in bowl after bowl on their heads like Faiza. But these bowls will be full of lavishly wrapped gifts for the bride and her family. The families of Chami will say that their son had seen a lovely flower in the garden of their prospective in-laws and had come to ask if they could pick it. She would joke and sing, and everyone would join in and be in the best of moods. After a certain number of items had been presented, the bride will ask her first appearance, amid a procession of shouting "Ifro Dondo." In my mind's eye, she was a lovely young girl, draped in glittering lace and beautiful beads, smiling shyly in the middle of the noisy procession and scanning the crowd for her beloved. But then my daydream switched tracks, and she turned into Asana, sad and weeping, had been given to old Alhaji Brown Teeth. What different things marriage could be, I mused. The increased volume of the TV interrupted my thoughts. Gifty had turned it up, taking advantage of Auntie's absence to watch her favorite Mexican telenovela. A handsome man and a beautiful woman were saying how much they loved each other. Their faces moved closer, as if pulled by invisible strings between their unblinking eyes. As their lips touched, I thought of Alhaji Brown Teeth again. I shuddered and turned away. "Ah, what is wrong with you?" asked Gifty. "You don't like kissing or what?" she continued, in a tone of one who did it all the time. That was typical of her. I couldn't help rising to the bait. "And you? Have you kissed?" I asked. "My boyfriend," she responded, with a gesture like a rap artist, dropping the D in the bit to sound American. It irritated me so much when she did that. She seemed to think she needed to impress me that way, and could clearly not see that she was doing the opposite. "What boyfriend?" I wanted to ask, but thought better of it. She will only invent some story that will waste my time. I pitied her for needing to be some invented person with an invented accent and invented lifestyle to impress me. I wondered when Faiza would be back. Gifty's fakeness always made me long for her company, the way I would long for a salty piece of Kobe after eating too many sweets. As if she had heard my thought, Faiza knocked lightly on the door. I knew it was her because that was how she knocked when she knew Auntie Lydia was not there and wanted to find out if I was free. I opened the door eagerly. "Your auntie said I should tell you she is going to take the lady to her seamstress," she informed us. "She said you should watch the shop for her." This was good news. With the traffic in the chatter, those two had stunk up. She will be away for a good while. Whenever she asked us to watch the shop, it meant that she was not hurrying back. I was dying to hear the continuation of Faiza's story, but at the same time, I had been waiting to show her the internet, and this was too good an opportunity to miss. There was no way to describe it to her without her actually seeing it for herself. The story will have to wait. I beckoned her inside. She hesitated. I usually came outside rather than asking her in, but this time I was confident because I knew we had time. Although Auntie had become much more relaxed with Faiza, and I suspected almost grown to like her, it was a tacit rule that we conducted our friendship outside the shop, and that she only came in to carry customers' goods. I was not too worried about Gifty because much of her resented Faiza. I knew she would not want to get into my bad books by reporting me. Moreover, I was older than her, and she was a little scared of me. Faiza knew about computers, but had never been this close to one, and she gave a little jump backward when it hummed into life at the touch of my finger. Gifty guffawed, but we both ignored her. That was something she disliked about Faiza, that her contempt just seemed to bounce off the girl and come back right to her. She went suddenly back to her telenovela, raising the volume higher, still to spite us. I was glad, as it gave us some privacy. Faiza watched the changing display of the laptop screen closely as it booted to life, and I could almost see her thoughts racing just as fast. I googled Tolong and found a website that gave some facts about the area. I read and translated them, and she exclaimed in fascination, "Yes, it is true. Those are the things we found." How do they know? I showed her a landscape photo with termite hill and a shea nut tree, and she cried out in excitement, "Yes, it is really our place." When I clicked on a photo of a mosque, and as it loaded in full size, she recognized it with a loud, "Wait," and her smile almost encircled her whole face. "My uncle rides there on his bicycle every Friday for prayers," she said. I told her the population of the town, and she pointed to me and said, "You have never been there, and yet you are able to tell me how many people are living there." And she shook her head in wonder. I read out a list of villages in the vicinity, and she laughed at my pronunciation till tears flowed down her cheeks. I was laughing too, clowning around. She would struggle to recognize each name, and the moment she did, would call out the correct version in delighted recognition. My attempts to copy her drew fresh laughter from both of us, especially when I tried to produce a sound she had made at the back of her throat that just did not exist in any other language I knew. Gifty shushed us, but we ignored her, and she turned back to the TV, sounding a loud between her teeth. I wanted to Google something else, but Faiza made me continue with the list of villages, hoping to hear her own, and sure enough, when we made it out through my mangled pronunciation, she gave a joyful little giggle. It was one of the real tongue twisters, but I made an extra effort since it was her own village, and she made an extra effort to teach me the correct pronunciation. One day, I'll come and visit you there, I told her. You are most welcome. She beamed and then added hesitantly, if only you can be comfortable at our place. I knew what she meant, and I've never felt like braving the discomforts of village life before, but I felt differently now. It was a great afternoon. From Faiza's village, we went to America on the internet, and I showed her the White House and the Statue of Liberty. She could not believe that people could go up into its crown. How can something built by human beings be so big? She marveled. So I took her to Egypt to show her what humans had built thousands of years ago. She could not believe that they had built the pyramids just to bury dead kings. Then we traveled millions of years back to see a dinosaur. She gave another jump backwards when T-Rex read up on the screen. Wait, she cried again. Look at its teeth. She had difficulty getting her mind round such vast time periods, and also had trouble with the concept that dinosaurs had lived on Earth for longer than humans. Even the mere fact that they had existed was not to swallow when I explained to her that their remains helped to create the oil we now use for petrol. She scanned my face sharply. If she had not trusted me, she would have doubted her eyes and ears. She asked me what had happened to the dinosaurs, and I had told her what I had heard on the nature program on the Discovery Channel, that they had been killed by an asteroid crashing into the Earth. How to explain this properly was another challenge, and I googled websites about the solar system and showed her the planets and tried to explain how they revolve around the sun. She asked me how we could possibly be revolving around something that rose and fell in the sky every day. I told her I didn't really know, but that she would just have to trust me on that one. If the people in my village knew all this, she whispered, they would never believe it. I had never appreciated the wonder of knowledge as much as I did that day, when I rediscovered the world through the eyes of someone who had never really known it was out there. I wondered what it must be like to know so little and have no idea how much more there was to know. It suddenly seemed a great privilege to know things I had always taken for granted. I was surprised at myself. I had thought we would spend much of our time googling movie stars and fashion pages, downloading pop videos on YouTube, and drooling over handsome stars. I would never have thought we would have so much fun just finding about the world around us. I had never realized how interesting it was. Kaya Girl, Chapter 5. Our trip into cyberspace was interrupted by a customer. As the door opened, I pushed Faiza away from the computer, and she grabbed a broom and busied herself with it at the far end of the shop, like a regular worker. The customer wanted some custom jewelry, and I brought out several sets. From their glass display case, she chose one, paid for it and left. As I put the others away, I lingered a little, arrested by the way in which the light brought them to life, like sparkling rainbows. Faiza put down her broom and came over to look too. On an impulse, I put one of the necklaces around her neck and pushed her in front of the mirror. "Wait," she exclaimed, horrified and delighted at the same time. She made to take it off, but I stopped her. "Don't worry," I said. "Auntie is far away. Let's have some fun." And I put the matching bracelet on her wrist and slipped the dangling earrings into her ears. We both looked into the mirror and laughed. The flashy jewels looked so incongruous on her, with her faded t-shirt and wrapper cloth. I grabbed a glossy piece of sea green satin from the fabric rack, passed it under her armpits, and fastened it around her bust, ignoring her protest. It fell to her feet and flowed out around her. Then I took a rich wine-colored sequin lace from the display cabinet and wrapped it around her shoulders so that her t-shirt was completely hidden. While she pleaded with me to stop the madness, I went to the cupboard and took out the green and silver gilly that I have been practicing tying and folding ever since Auntie Omotola next door had given me a lesson. It had become quite a hobby, like origami, and I was particularly proud of my latest arrangement with several tiny hidden pins keeping in place the rows of fold that opened out into a fan at the crown of the head. I removed Pfizer's usual small head scarf and crowned it with a majestic headpiece. We looked in the mirror again, and this time nobody laughed. Pfizer was beautiful. She looked like a different person. I saw things in her that I had never seen before. Her high cheekbones were accentuated by the angles of her headdress. The rich fabrics next to her skin brought out its velvety smoothness, and the kohl she wore under her eyes stood out sharply against the whites of her eyes, which sparkled as if competing with the jewels hanging from her ears. Even the tribal marks on her cheeks now lent her an exotic look, like a queen of an ancient empire. "Pfizer," I breathed. She smiled her immense smile, making this new portrait of herself even more spectacular. Gifty appeared behind us in the mirror, staring at Pfizer as if she had never seen her before. It was as if a magic spell had frozen us all in time. Then Gifty broke it, coming back to her usual self with, "You two are really looking for trouble now." I opened the door and peeked outside, but there was no sign of Auntie or any other customers heading our way. I was still on a high, so I told Gifty to mind her own business and gave her some money to go and buy sweets for all of us. I knew that would get her out of the way for a while, and at the same time, make her less troublesome. She loved sweets and was always pestering me to buy them for her. After she left, I took down one of the ready-made bubbles and slipped it over my head. It was purple, with elaborate embroidery all the way down the front, from the neck to hem in picked edge with glinting metallic gold. I put on another set of custom jewelry with glinting pink stone. I ran a comb through my permed hair and flapped it out, tying the matching purple strings around it like an Alice band. I grabbed Auntie's pink lipstick and streaked it across my lips. Then I did the same to Pfizer. We stood next to each other in front of the mirror, like women who would need to be presented with many headbands full of luxurious goods before anyone could ask for the hand of their daughter in marriage. We each folded our arms and stood back to back, our profiles against the mirror. For once, Pfizer matched my height because of her headdress. "Who do you think I am?" I asked in a queenly voice, with an extravagant gesture of my hand. "How dare you bring these nyama-nyama things to ask for my daughter's hand?" Pfizer splattered with laughter. "Sister, what do you say to this presumptuous young man?" I continued, turning towards her with my nose in the air. "Never," she said, recovering quickly from her laughing fit and slipping into her role as if she had rehearsed it. "Can you not see we are queens? Look at our robes and our jewels. We shall never give our princess to you. She's too good for you." We both laughed so hard that we did not hear Gifty come back in. "Auntie is here," she hissed breathlessly. She had obviously tried to stay ahead of Auntie Lydia, but I spotted her through the gap in the door, just a couple of paces away. Pfizer and I looked at each other, with our hearts in our mouths, disaster upon us, and there was nothing we could do about it. But just as Auntie put her hand on the door handle, Auntie Omotola called out from next door, "Ma Lydia, I hear your new best friend is a minister's wife, Abi." News travel fast in the market, so that was what the woman was, I thought, still standing rooted to the spot. No wonder. No be small thing o, my sister. Auntie called back, laughing into pidgin, as she liked to do with that lady. They both spoke good English, but Auntie Lydia always preferred to speak Twi with her friends, and as Auntie Omotola spoke no Ghanaian language, they chose pidgin as a more convivial vehicle of communication. I love hearing Auntie Omotola speak Nigerian pidgin. I especially loved it when she exclaimed, "Nawao." Auntie Lydia's hand remained on the door handle, pushing it slightly further ajar, while she spoke to Auntie Omotola. If she had just looked through the crack, she would have seen us standing frozen inside, like dolled-up statues. As she lingered at the doorway, I felt a rivulet of sweat slide down the nape of my neck to the hollow of my back, yet my fingers and toes were freezing cold. I realized I was trembling. With a superhuman effort, I steadied myself and started to formulate a plan. Here was a chance, albeit a slim one, to avert disaster, and it would be foolish to miss it by succumbing to panic. I motioned to Faiza, and we both backed slowly and noiselessly out of Auntie's line of sight. If I prayed harder enough, I thought. Yes, she was releasing her grip on the door handle and turning away towards Auntie Omo's shop. I knew my auntie. She could not resist showing off her new conquest. She was going to have a little gossip next door before she came back to the shop. And of course, Auntie Omo will be hoping to benefit from this new customer. After all, it was not a long walk from here to her shop, and as she told me when she gave me my lesson, every good lace needed a good gilly. There was no time to lose. I grabbed Faiza's hand and pulled her out of the door, risking everything on the chance that Auntie would keep her back turned. A fleeting glance showed her to be leaning over Auntie Omo's counter, gesticulating with her hands to add more flavor to her florid account of the day in pidgin. The risk had paid off. We dared not linger, and I pulled Faiza in the opposite direction, rounded the first corner, and dashed into an alley where the hubbub of noise and activities drowned out our panic. We leaned against a wall, panting for breath. I looked at Faiza. "Nawao," she said, and we burst into hysterical giggles. We laughed for what seemed like forever because we just could not seem to stop. I really wonder if we could ever have stopped if a man at a nearby shop had not called out to us, "Happy sisters, come and look at my things." We looked at him and then at each other once again. "I have lovely things for beautiful ladies like you," he continued, pronouncing it beautiful, in an attempt at an American accent. A fresh round of giggles broke out but gave way to gasps and finally to severity as the reality of the situation struck us with full force. In our flight and our relief at escaping, we had momentarily forgotten what we looked like. Now, we realized what we were being taken for. Real rich ladies. I will never forget Faiza at that moment. She turned towards him with perfect poise, her fun headdress profiling beautifully, and said in English, more polished than I had ever realized she possessed, "Why not?" And she pulled me by the hand towards the shop. I felt as if I was walking with a stranger, and a sense of unreality grew as we browsed through the fancy goods in the shop, acting for all the world as if that was what we did every day. Faiza made it so simple. She would hold out a dress on the hanger and say to me, "How about this one?" And I'll hold it against myself, hemming and hawing, while she cocked her head to one side and made comments in flawless English like, "No, not your color, not your style." How did she do that? I wondered. And then it came to me in a flash. Of course, she had been watching her customers, the rich ladies who stopped at boutiques. She had had plenty of opportunity to study the ways of a madame, and she had probably supplemented this with memorizing phrases she heard in films. The market was such a vast and public space, and it was easy for a Kayayo to catch snatches of videos and telenovelas. What made it so amazing was that it was not just the language she mimicked so perfectly, it was the mannerisms as well. Gifty would have grinned with envy, but that was the difference between them. Faiza only did it for a laugh. She would never be anything but herself with people who mattered to her. The shop attendant's face mirrored the rise and fall of his hopes as we played out the scene perfectly, managing to hold in our laughter till we had extricated ourselves and rounded another corner. "I can't believe he took us seriously," I gasped, hardly able to get the words out. My sides ached with laughter. Faiza too was doubled over, one hand steadying her gilly, which threatened to fall as her body shook with mirth. When I looked back, I couldn't believe that we were laughing and fooling around instead of getting out of those clothes as quickly as possible and finding a way to return them and ourselves safely to Auntie's shop. But we were girls, drunk with adventure, taking courage from each other, and we could not resist venturing into few more shops, doing our rich ladies' acts. The more seriously we were taken, the more our confidence grew. I could not remember who pulled whom, but somehow we both knew where we would end up, and sure enough, there we sadly were, in front of Blankson's Electricals. Mr. Blankson had a pair of handsome nephews whom Faiza and I had discussed on more than one occasion. They were brothers, similar but different, cool as cucumbers, and we had nicknamed them Peter and Paul, like P-square twins. They were also on long vacations from school and were assisting their uncle in his shop. They showed people how to use electrical gadgets on sale and help with repairs of electrical machines like fans and televisions. They also made sure the latest hip-hop or hip-life music was blaring from the shop. Somehow, we always seemed to pass that shop on our way to the food store and most other places we went together. Whether or not it was really on the way, the boys were both older than us and they had never noticed us, but today it was different. "May I help you?" asked our Peter, whom Faiza had somehow found out was really called Stephen. He was cute alright and well built too. He looked at Faiza closely, a half smile playing on his lip, and I noticed that the confidence she had displayed in the other shops weighed under his gaze. I came to her rescue. "We want to buy a TV, please," I heard myself announce. Stephen led us to the TV section, not taking his eyes off her. There were many television sets, and they all seemed to be showing different things, including on one an episode of Mr. Bean. Faiza started watching it. Stephen's brother, our Paul, joined us, tall and lanky, with a crooked grin that flashed white against black. There was a fresh spicy scent about him that made me to inhale so deeply that I felt lightheaded. I looked over at Faiza to see what she thought of him, but she was absorbed in Mr. Bean and had started chuckling in spite of herself. Stephen was laughing too, and then they would look at each other and laugh harder. It reminded me of how Daddy always said that he and I had our funny bones at the same spots. I realized that Paul was talking to me, wanting to know the type of television set we wanted. Oh dear, I hadn't thought of that. "Plasma," I said with a sudden inspiration of word aspiration. "Plasma?" he repeated, impressed. "Sure, come this way." We walked away from the other two and he showed me a number of plasma screens, but I found it much easier to take in details of his appearance than the specifications of those television sets. All the same, I pretended to be fascinated because I could keep him talking and flashing that grin that gave me a pleasantly wobbly feeling in the stomach each time. "No one be like you," I sang in my head. "So, which one is it going to be?" he asked finally, jerking me out of my daydream and into the inconvenient reality that I must now buy a TV. "Oh, well, actually, I'm not sure they're compatible, you see." He looked puzzled. "Compatible with what?" "Well, with our whole system back home." "How do you mean?" he asked, studying my face. You know, analog, digital, that sort of thing. I bluffed, fighting down panic. What? He said. Oh dear, I thought. Word association could only take one so far. I was in trouble now. Okay, maybe I'm not explaining it very well, I stammered. But it's just that my dad told me to make sure it was compatible and to tell you the truth. And I pulled a helpless face. I'm really not sure what he meant. It worked. The ice was broken. Well, Dadaba, he teased me, flashing the grin. You better tell Daddy to calm himself. I grinned too. Thanks, P. Mike, he supplied, holding out his hand to shake mine. He asked for my name too and said it was a pleasure to meet me. I felt the same way.